Anyway, I did that long walk, came back, job hunted for a bit, ended up in Iraq. So Iraq is a massive country. When I say I've taken my wife to Iraq, I've taken my wife to northern Iraq, this little Kurdish bit up here, which has a trivial amount of issues or concerns, let's say. In fact, when I first started going to Iraq in 2014, 2015, the British Embassy's main concern was the lack of accommodation for tourists coming over for the Hajj in the tourist belt south of Baghdad. I think their concerns changed, obviously, when Islamic State came, but most of the worst of the issues have taken place where Islamic State were in Al-Anbar, the Sunni Triangle, and up in Nineveh. Right in the southern Iraq, where we're operating, supporting the international oil companies, there is some violence there, but it's predominantly tribal. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're getting hit with a 7.62 fired from an AK-47 because of tribal politics or because of ISIS. It's still painful, but it's not as bad in the south as it is elsewhere. Time in Basra, we're providing mobile protective security to the oil companies. We put out I forget how many cars we had now on the Basra Gas Company contract, enough to drive the distance in 2 years from here to the moon and back again. Kind of a big statistic, many millions of kilometers. Bottom right-hand side there is a little checkpoint, and these are the bane of our lives. There is no strategic thought in Iraq. Everybody is an emperor in charge of his own office or his own checkpoint. So these guys, if you didn't have the right paperwork, would stop a multi-billion-dollar program progressing by arresting an engineer who didn't have the right passport number entered on a piece of paper. I mean, it's a really difficult and bizarre country. We did a lot of static security. This guy is Neil Taylor, wonderful guy, who ran static security on Majnoon oil field, which is like being on the moon. Majnoon has a lot of tribal dynamics, let's say. And when there's an issue on the oil field, it was often Neil who would sort out the issues between the tribes. And here he'd had to mediate between two bunches of people, and he kind of got me in just to come and pretend to be, well, I was the big boss, but just to emphasize the fact that he had some wasta, and he managed to get me involved. And I forget now what the conflict was, but we managed to resolve it. These are from space. If you look at Basra from space, you can see the lines of the pipes, the oil pipes going from the oil fields down to the sea. And you can see them because they're marked by degassing stations where they pull gas out of the oil and burn it off. And that burning is what you can see here. Those gas flares you can see from space, and the black smoke. I don't know what the cancer rate is in Basra, but it ain't good. And that's probably one of the reasons why. So a lot of the work that we were doing was helping Iraqis capture the natural gas that was otherwise being burned off. I mean, these guys, can you believe that these guys are importing gas from Iran for their domestic use while they're burning this lot off? It's all a little bit crazy. So that was Basra. Baghdad. Spoken about the man with the rope, Dr. Mofak al-Rubai, worth looking up. Nice guy. The guys on the money thing. I was here sitting in this kitchen in this very spot when my phone rang, and it was Duncan Martin Smith, my ops director, who the guys never rang me. I said, "Don't ring me unless somebody's dead." So it was like not great to have a call from Duncan. And he said, "Mate, we've had $1 million stolen." And I said, "Okay, it's only money. I'm sure we'll get it back." And he said later that was the most sensible call he'd had all day. And I rang my pal, my Iraqi pal, one of our fixers, and said, "Mate, we've had a bit of money stolen. I need to get the Iraqi police involved. I need to get the money back." And he said, "Hold on, stop. You've had a logic breakdown. Do you want to get the Iraqi police involved, or do you want the money back?" And I said, "I really want the money back." And he said, "Okay, let's not involve the Iraqi police." So we got the counter-terrorism police involved, these guys, and they came and interviewed some of our staff. After 2 days of quiet interviews, they took a guy into custody. After 3 days in custody, the guy took them to his house, opened up his sofa, which he stuffed with $1 million.
Thank you.
Somebody have a question? I'm going to keep rolling on. So I do like how best to phrase this. When you're a soldier, you can live in terrible conditions or you can live in decent conditions. When you're a managing director, you can recruit nice people or you can recruit terrible people. And I always worked on the principle that recruiting nice people makes it a more pleasant working environment for everybody. And when the expats come in and visit the office and see the people you've got working in the office, they'll work for less. So this is my birthday party in December 2018. And this is the lovely Marwa, who was our finance director. And the lady on the right is Mauj, my assistant, who I recruited from a hotel nearby. I used to walk past and say, we're going to go dancing. And it's quite a conservative society, so she didn't really believe me, but I made it happen. And when I needed an assistant, I rang the manager of the hotel, who was a pal of mine, and said, the girl with the long hair, what's her name? And he told me. I said, I wanted to work for me. Do you think she'd mind? And he sent me the CV through and made it happen. I like her a lot. She's a great girl. She joined me and said, I want to marry a Turkish guy and go and live in Istanbul. Given that at this stage, I took her to Basra to go and visit the business there. It was the first time she'd ever left home, first time she'd ever not been under her father's roof. Guess what? She's now living in Istanbul with a Turkish guy. And it's taken her 2 years to bring that to fruition. What a great girl. And I haven't done, well, actually, I've done loads of photography, evidently, but I haven't done a lot of formal photography. And what I've found, being the boss of these organizations, it's very difficult to blend in. Wherever you go, you are it. So it's kind of difficult to take decent photographs without having an impact on your audience, let's say. But I managed to get this guy. This guy was our gardener. I brought him in. He's a nice guy. I don't know how old he is. Probably not quite as old as he looks. I mean, everybody in Iraq, all of my staff under 30. So it was one of my finance ladies' 30th birthdays in February, and it was the 30th anniversary of the cessation of hostilities in Iraq. And it made me realize that she's known nothing but war fighting, sanctions, or civil war all of her life. And so the fact that all of the Iraqis that I meet are so happy and joyful and full of life and fun is a real testament to their resilience. This guy, my gardener, he's a nice guy. He had 2 sons. One of his sons, they had a civil war in Iraq between Sunni and Shia around 2006, 2007, 2008. And what was a very diverse Baghdad with people living in a mixed communities all across the city became a very divided community, much along the lines of West Belfast, with Catholics and Protestants occupying their own areas. And to be caught at the wrong checkpoint at the wrong day with the wrong identification could mean the end. And sadly, he lost a son who was stopped at a checkpoint and never seen again. I managed to photograph these two together, and it's one of the very few formal portraits that I've taken. Lugging my camera gear over to Baghdad isn't always easy, but I kind of like that. So at the time, that was Mauj, my most recent employee, and him, Baba Sheikh, our most long-standing employee. I think we use that as a sort of internal communication piece across G4S. I'm still in touch with both of them, obviously. Almost went to her wedding. If it hadn't been for COVID, I'd have gone to her wedding in Istanbul. Went up to Ramadi. That's another pal of mine, a former member of parliament. Nice guy, invited me up for lunch. We hadn't been to Ramadi in many years before Islamic State came. So Islamic State buggered off. He got his house back and he asked us to go up and visit. And I spent like an hour, a really awkward hour with him. I didn't know him that well, trying to make conversation, just him and me over lunch. And then he said, come and meet my friends. And then we had another really awkward half an hour where we all sat in this long meeting room and just he and I chatting. And I said to him, your friends have an enormous capacity for silence. And he said, they don't speak English. They're being polite and letting you speak. It's like, thanks for putting me on my ease, dude. And then he said, do you want to be on Al-Anbar TV? And I said, not really. I have a face for radio. And he said, it's a shame because the cameras are here. So I ended up being on Al-Anbar TV. It was all part of his pitch for re-election to Parliament. And obviously my part in it didn't do him a massive favor because he didn't get re-elected, but he has forgiven me. I did quite a bit of tooling around, getting up suited and booted and going off to places and meeting people. We won some contracts with UNMAS, United Nations Mine Action Service, to go and clear explosive remnants of war from Mosul, Kirkuk, and from Sinjar. And as part of my job really is to go and meet the people who have influence in those places, to tell them that we're coming, that we're bringing employment, and essentially, please don't shoot us. So the guys on the left, these are the heads from the families. I mean, it's like an episode from The Sopranos. These are the heads of the families in Kirkuk, which is an oil-rich town. It felt, not that I've ever been, but it felt like being in Chechnya. They were all incredibly polite with each other. And I love the Middle Eastern culture. It's like in the West, the person that does all the talking is the guy that's powerful because he's got to make his point. The Middle Eastern culture, it's absolutely the opposite. The guy that says nothing is the guy that has the power. And this guy said nothing throughout the whole meeting until right at the end, and then just raised his hand and then started speaking. And you could tell by the way that everybody else was deferential towards him that he was the main man. And as much as they were polite to each other, I suspect that if they had a fallout, they'd solve their issues with an under-vehicle booby trap or something. Quite interesting place. And the other photograph, one of the tribal leader, I'm sitting there on my left. We're absolutely mirroring each other's body language, which is funny. I don't know who felt less comfortable. That's the governor of Kirkuk. And on my right is one of the local tribal chiefs. And to his horror, that rifle, I've got one of those at home. I'm a registered firearms certificate holder. Don't worry, it's not unlawful. I pulled that off and stripped it down in front of him. And I don't think, looking through it, he'd never taken it apart. He was absolutely horrified. And I put it back together and he was happy again.